Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, following on from what Tim was saying earlier, I'd like to think that our spot is an opportunity, not a threat for the industry. We were supposed to have 4 people on the panel today as well, and unfortunately Gay couldn't make it because she got track and trace this morning, I believe. So if I can introduce our panellists to begin with. Una, who you met earlier, is a commercial director for Saika Nature, the environmental services arm of the Saika group. And then we have Ruth Cook, who's the group CEO of the GWP group. And then we have Jennifer Rodell, who is managing director of Boxes and Packaging, which is part of the Logston group up in Scotland. So first of all, ladies, can I ask each of you in turn to explain what your current role is and how you've progressed in your career and arrived at that role to date? We start at the far end with Una.
Okay. Right, so I'm commercial director in Saika. My career was very much based in the environmental services sector. I joined the environmental services sector as a graduate. I was a bit of a tree hugger, it has to be said, and I thought, you know, back in the 90s, I was going to save the planet on my own. I joined the waste management industry, which at the time was not the most glamorous of industries at all. And I did a number of different roles, from commercial development, running treatment plants, running recycling facilities, to the point where then I progressed up the greasy pole to, and then 5 years ago I joined Saika to effectively look after the environmental services commercial arm of that business in the UK and Ireland.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ruth Cook, so I'm CEO of GWP Group based in Wiltshire. I started back in '89. I was part of a set-up business, so GWP started with 5 of us. I was brought in to do the management accounts and administration, so very much office-based, probably fairly typical female role. But being part of a small group, I got involved in anything and everything that was to do with the business. I became FD a couple of years later, and 15 years ago was managing director of GWP Packaging. During that time, we also bought other businesses along the way, and I became CEO a couple of years ago.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Rodell. I am Managing Director of Boxes and Packaging and includes Box Shop in Scotland. I'm the newbie as far as packaging is concerned. I joined the business just over 2 years ago from a technical operational manufacturing background, an engineer, so started in a male-dominated industry and have remained in one, I have to say. So I've been looking after the businesses in Scotland for that time, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And then to just move on for our topic for today, I suppose we're talking about women in our industry. And the first question, which I can already anticipate what you're going to say, looking out at our audience this afternoon, is, do you see yourself as still working in a male-dominated industry? And how has that changed since we started? And actually, just a little information for people today, we actually have 49% male in the UK as a whole at the moment. So there's no reason why it should be such a male-dominated industry. But yeah, how do you feel that's changed since you started? Ruth, would you like to?
Yeah. Okay, so I've been coming to the SPA for many years now, so I'd have to say it has changed, although you'd be shocked to see if you looked at the percentage of women here today. But when I first came, I was occasionally the only female, or 1 or 2. So it's quite intimidating, if I'm truthful. And I think fundamentally it has changed and it is getting better, but we clearly have got a very long way to go. What has definitely changed is the attitude towards women. It's encouraged now, as opposed to previously. I wouldn't say it was discouraged, but it was, who are you? Why are you here? Whereas now we are welcomed. And I think that's something we should really take ownership of and do something about.
Good. And Una, would you like to comment on that piece?
The waste and recycling industry, like I said, it's not glamorous. And when I joined the industry back in the 90s, there was shock and horror at the fact that a woman would want to get into a pair of overalls and climb into with breathing apparatus and sample chemicals, etc. And I did have to work very hard to get people to allow me to do that work. And it wasn't so much that, it was just that common perception that women don't particularly like to do more manual work. And in that regard, from a waste industry point of view, over the years, I think I've seen a complete change. Women have moved from the traditional administration back office support roles to more certainly full customer focused areas and roles. And more as our industry becomes more technical, we've moved from very much a manual process of processing recyclables and waste to more technical processing. And as we've done that, it has become more of an interesting industry for people with technical and scientific backgrounds to get involved in. So I've certainly seen an increase, but I have to say, at this moment in time, you know, the waste and recycling sector does not have a lot of women at senior levels within the organisation, and that really is the next step for us.
Yeah, moving on from that, actually, I was going to ask Jennifer, who's fairly new to our sector. Do you see a difference across from the shop floor to the boardroom, and do you see varying levels of women in those various roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the others have said, there's still a lack of female representation at all different levels, be it in direct manufacturing or in technical roles or in management or in upper management levels. There's definitely a lack. I think there is more receptive understanding that it would be valuable to have a mixed workforce and have people with different genders and therefore expectations and what people bring to that. To me personally, as a sort of a technical background, recruiting and being able to attract people in who are from technicals is still a real gap, and I don't think that's been addressed yet. Is how do we do that actively? As you say, trying to make sure that people are aware that it's a job that anyone can do.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think we talk about getting women onto the board, and it's been proved by various studies that actually if you have 30% of women on your senior board, then the company is far more profitable and works far better. But it's how do we get the women in at the various levels to get them up, because apparently for 100 men promoted to management level, there's only 86 women across the board. So it's how do you get that in? And could I just ask, as a show of hands, do any of your companies have females on your senior management teams? Oh, so that's more than what I would expect, actually, looking out.
They just don't come to the SPA.
They stay yeah, they.
Or are they all in the same company as me?
Yeah, they're not allowed to come. And moving on from that, then, what do you see as the disadvantages and advantages of having the gender diversity at the various levels? Jennifer, would you like to start with that?
I think one of the biggest issues I see is it's very easy to revert back to groupthink or genderthink to a certain extent, and if you have a non-mixed workforce, you would tend to get a very specific set of answers, and often people are defaulting to, well, that's what we all think's right. Different people from different backgrounds, and I would say very much different genders, do bring a different perspective. And that sometimes is missing, and to me that's a huge value. There's about the way people look at a certain solution, the efficiencies and the way that it's approached, and I think those, if you can have a balanced workforce in any area, make quite a considerable difference.
Yeah, I agree, actually. Would either of you like to comment
I
on
think
that?
I'd add to that, it's not just about gender, that's about age, culture.
Yeah.
I think we can all benefit through a business of having a real mixed approach.
Yeah, and I think, as you all know, in our industry, not only are we mostly male in this room, but also the average age is probably 50 plus. So we've got, moving on to the next question, really. Wow. Most, I didn't say all. I suppose the next question is how do we attract females to our industry, but also how do we attract young people to our industry? We need to work hard, as a CPI we're talking about. There's a lot going on in our industry. There's a lot of exciting things that we can all work on. But it's how do we get that message out to the young people that they want to say, I want to go and work in packaging. And so have you got any views on how we attract young people?
I think you go with
Well, I was really struck by the tone of the discussions or the presentations that I was listening in on earlier. And one of the things that has really struck me over the last couple of years, and I've been very proud of, is how the younger generation have really grasped the importance of, our role in the environment. We are protectors of the environment. And I do think that we have the opportunity to position ourselves both within the packaging industry and the recycling packaging industry to demonstrate and get those bright young things to join us, because it's not just a job, it is greater than that. It's the planet is what we are is at risk. And I do think that like we all said, the roles now in our industry are very much more technical, more scientific, and it does give a far broader base of the type of skills that we are looking at. And one thing I would say, and what it's been that I've been very struck with over the last couple of years, it's not just about getting females into the industry, but I do think age and knowledge has a really important position. And let's not forget, us lot who are getting older, who bring a huge amount of experience and knowledge, and we shouldn't forget that, and we should make positions available to bring that knowledge and skill and capture that.
And I think it's not just attracting them as well, is then what do we do to retain these young people in our industry? Because you want to, I think gone is the time where you look for a job that you're going to stay in the same job the rest of your life, but it's how we plan careers and progression, entice young people in, and then have something to keep them there. Have you got any views on how we retain young talent?
I was going to say there's lots of programmes in the UK, from sponsored apprenticeship schemes to personal development programmes that you can do with further educational establishments, or various solutions. And I think more cohesive understanding of what would that be. People are, particularly younger people, are expecting an organisation to have a personal development programme, whatever guise that might come in. They are looking for it, be it academic qualifications or experiential qualifications, and organisations, if you want to hold on to that talent and have sort of concrete succession plans, need to look at that and say, what works for our workforce? Where can I find solutions? Otherwise, the turnover is you will train them. And you will train some to leave, of course, but you need to try and invest in that and understand people have quite high expectations of gaining some experience.
Because as the Women in Packaging Association, we have looked at setting up mentor programmes, and whether you think having a mentor within the company helps with young people. Do any of you do that kind of thing?
We don't. We should. But I think, again, talking on behalf of sheep plants, there's not really, that we haven't got the depth. So looking to organisations to support that would be good. Because, mentoring, it's anything that you can use to encourage young people to progress and see opportunities, I think is really important. But it's looking, again, for something that maybe for the smaller businesses, the support areas out there. And if I've seen anything, I've seen a lot of that sort of thing close down. So, through education and colleges, things that were specific for the packaging industry have closed over years. So sort of opportunities to open that back up within engineering things would be good.
Yeah, I think there's some training opening up, as you mentioned earlier. There's a lot more apprenticeships now. There's the first packaging degree apprenticeship, which has started at Sheffield University. And as associations, we're starting to work with all of these people and offer more specific packaging apprenticeships, which have not been there either. So
I think to promote that would be really good.
Yeah, I think they need that. So going on then, what do you see as the main challenges then for our businesses going forward in terms of, I suppose we're talking about women, but I'd see it's women, young people, and generally really how we're going to make sure that we have the right people in the right roles, because I firmly believe, yes, we'd like to see more women because society is made up of men and women, but we don't want to put women in roles just for the sake of having the numbers of women. We want to give the opportunities there so we have a varied workforce. And what do you see as the main challenges to achieve this going forward?
I think, as we've said, things have got better, and I think it's continuing to work with that. I do think we talked about COVID over the last couple of years, where people are now having a hybrid of working from home, and so I think the whole work-life balance is changing. I think that will help women, because women do need to tend to be, as mothers, more flexible. So I think there's opportunities. We just need to keep working with it.
I agree with that. I think that this old traditional idea of having to be in the office for 14 hours or 16 hours a day is the only way you can get on. I think we need to change that, because I think over the last couple of years we've proven that that is not necessary. And I think until that culture, I think business need to engender a culture to allow women to develop, to have that balance between work and home, and the two are not mutually exclusive. You can be a successful woman and have a successful career and also balance the needs of a home life, and that's the culture that we need to instill in our businesses.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. And could I ask the floor if you've got any points or questions you would like to ask the panellists?
If you don't mind, can each of you give me like one great piece of advice that you'd love to pass on to other women in our industry or just in business in general that you think might really help them?
Gin.
Was that gin or Jim? Gin.
I would say being a woman is a benefit, not a negative, and use it, because we are different and it is being recognised, and that's a great advantage, and it should put people in a good position.
For me, I would say just believe in your capabilities. Everybody is different, and it is absolutely valid to have a different perspective and a different opinion. And therefore, if you have a different opinion in a room full of potentially male colleagues, that's absolutely fine. It just means that it's a different opinion. So hold on to that and try not to be intimidated when that's the case.
And I would say network. And network. And network.
Debbie, I have a comment rather than a question, if that's all right. You mentioned it would be a good idea to get some formal mentoring programs. I think that's something that the Sheep Plant Association can set up, because you rightly say a sheep plant that turns over £4 or £5 million might not have the HR resources to handle a mentoring program themselves, but a trade association that represents hundreds of millions of pounds worth of turnover can easily do it. So I think that the committee will work on finding a mentoring program so that we can all look within our businesses for young, inspiring, aspiring people, so that we can actually give them a formal mentoring program.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, I think that would definitely be a benefit to companies. It's not an easy thing to do, because you need commitment from both sides, and I think it needs to be a cross competition in many respects as well. You know, you're not talking about competing one company to another, but yeah, I think it would be very beneficial.
Any further questions for our female panel? There's one here.
It's just to say, you just took the words out of my mouth about the mentoring programme, but I think what's really important for a mentoring programme to work is that the mentors and the mentees have a clear expectation of what that programme entails. So, you know, it's very much about training both parties, especially the mentors.
Can I just say one thing about mentoring? And I was going to say this when we were talking. Mentoring, yes, it does require a formality that you need to, as a business, set it up. What we've done is we've introduced a buddy system. And a buddy system, it kind of brings down the mentoring to a little bit more informal. Identify somebody in the business, identify a role, and then you can, there's no reason why you can't introduce a buddying up system very, very quickly, whilst you maybe consider how this mentoring program would work.
I think the buddy piece works at a lower level, but if you're a professional in a management role and a woman, I think that it just needs to be a little bit more formalised.
And I think often as well you want, and again it's not we saying men, women, but we do sometimes want to bounce ideas off another woman in a senior role, because we do, as you mentioned earlier, we approach things in a different way and we think about things slightly differently to the men. That's just the way we are. And I think sometimes you just need people you know in the industry that you can just ring up and say, how would you handle this? What would you do about this? And that's not really mentoring. I'm not sure how you would term that, but that's probably in the networking scheme, but therapy over a gin. But yeah. Are there any other questions?
I'd just like to thank our panel and our
Oh,
moderator.
sorry.
Talking about the change in attitudes towards work-life balance, have you got any thoughts on the studies that are happening around 4-day working weeks at the moment, and whether that might cement and affect that further?
In my experience, 4-day working weeks will always become 5 or 6-day working weeks. So I'm not too sure I have actually.
I would tend to agree with you. It can very much just spawn into 4 very, very long days.
Yeah.
So I would caution anyone to really be sure about that decision. I'm not saying it's not valid and it doesn't work for some people. I think maybe there's more room nowadays from our last few years of COVID to really understand hybrid and balanced working more actively for anybody in the workplace.
And I think however much we want, the more senior you become, then the more time you spend at work. And I think you can't get away from that. And it doesn't have to necessarily be 5 days sat at your desk in the office, but it's certainly not 8 hours, 4 days a week. I think, it's just how I think what COVID has taught us, as we mentioned earlier, is we can work differently. I don't think we work any less hours. It's just how we manage
I think
to fit
flexibility.
that into
I
our
think
lives.
being flexible, and
Yeah.
I think that's what's changed. So
Yeah.
I think to say I'm only available 4 days a week to be in senior management, I don't think you can ever do that.
No.
But I think to be around but not necessarily sat at your desk is definitely doable.
Yeah, I would agree.
Can we thank our panellists and moderator? Thank you very much.
Thank you.